Community Development. We're going to wait another minute or two to start the meeting. I believe, Dr. Schulman, are you sharing your screen, or is that Katura?
That's me.
Can you, I'm going to do a presentation to start this meeting. And then once I'm finished, we can switch over and have you do your presentation.
How about that? Does that work? All right.
Yep, that's good.
Actually experiment to see if I could do it.
Yeah.
Appreciate everybody taking their time to be here this evening.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here. We're just waiting to start this meeting because Supervisor Ann Malik is supposed to be joining us, and she's not yet in the Zoom webinar. So
yeah,
that's what we're waiting for. We'll give it another couple minutes.
Okay.
Well, I didn't think there were that many things that people could do in Charlottesville on a Wednesday evening, considering. Not a big crowd.
I would think more people would participate being a Zoom meeting than
Yeah.
actual in person, but we'll see. So are you working at all anymore, Marty, or?
Yeah, I am currently 3 days a week. I think by the end of August, it'll just be 3 days in September. And then I'm a free bird, which is not a bad deal.
Plans on what to do?
Plans? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
In 7 directions. I have a woodworking shop. I do some timber framing. I'm working on some outbuildings. Got a sprinter van to upfit into a camper. And when communities open up, I should be ready to go.
Sweet.
Sounds good.
Congratulations.
Okay, everyone, I think we're going to begin. Supervisor Malik may be joining us shortly. She's not here yet, but given that this meeting was posted to begin at 6 o'clock, I think we should probably start. So good evening, everyone. My name is Cameron Langell, and I'm a senior planner with the Albemarle County Department of Community Development.
Hey, Cameron.
Yeah,
Sorry to
hi,
interrupt you.
Commissioner
Ann is I think she's gonna use her phone to call in.
okay,
So I think you can start with your stuff because we hear that
okay,
sort of same thing, but she's on her way, just so you know,
okay. Thanks for that update.
for sure.
So tonight we are here for what we call a community meeting for a rezoning application that's currently under review with Albemarle County. I'm managing that review of the rezoning, and we have the applicants here tonight. The purpose of this meeting is just to give the public some information about what's being proposed. I'm going to do a presentation that goes over the rezoning process with the county, and then we will turn it over to the applicant, and they're going to do a presentation on the specifics of their project. After both of us finish our presentations, we will then be taking questions or comments from any of the attendees who are here at the meeting. If you all notice, there is a raise your hand function in the participant chat bar, which should probably be on the right side of your screen. If you do have any questions or comments, please click that raise hand button, and we are monitoring that. And so we will see anyone who has clicked it, and then we will call on you and you will be able to speak or ask your question. Okay, I have a couple of my colleagues here as well, and they're going to help facilitate the discussion.
Thanks, Cam.
Cameron, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So we can't see that there are, there's people watching that we can't see here in this panelist group, but can you see that? And Caroline can see that?
That's correct.
Is that correct? So if they have questions when that time comes, they can raise their hand through you. Carolyn will help you get those.
Exactly.
There are more people watching and listening than what we can see just here on our screen.
Yeah, right now it looks like we have 8 attendees. And as you mentioned, Carolyn can help us switch over if they do have any questions.
And I think that Ann just got on the call. She just called in maybe. Ann, if you're the caller or whoever the caller is, if you want to raise your hand, it's *9 on your cell phone. That way we know you want to speak. Okay, Cameron, it's all yours.
Thanks, Carolyn. Okay, everyone, I'm going to share my screen and I'll do my presentation. Okay, can everyone see my PowerPoint? Should say Old Dominion Village Community Meeting.
Yes.
Okay. So again, the purpose of the meeting tonight is to share some information about this proposed project, as well as the process for reviewing rezoning applications with Albemarle County. There will be a chance for you to offer any input or ask questions you have, and that information will be written down by staff and mentioned in the staff report that will go to the Planning Commission and the board as this project moves forward. So to start, I just want to talk about how development happens here in Albemarle County. As you can see in this image, it's a multi-step process. This application we have tonight is what we call a zoning map amendment. Most people refer to it as a rezoning. And it's a special kind of application to do a private land development project that actually requires review by the Planning Commission and then a final action by the Board of Supervisors on whether to approve or deny the proposal. After the rezoning is finished, assuming it's approved, it then goes through another set of processes with us for site plan review, and then of course it can begin construction and eventually be complete. So zoning is something that a lot of people have questions about, and I want to talk about that for a few minutes. Zoning is the set of regulations that dictates what can be built in a county, and basically it goes by property and property. So every property in the county has a different zoning district assigned to it. And the types of uses that are allowed on each property depends on what that zoning district allows for. Albemarle County, we use zoning to group land into different areas. And the purpose of that is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of residents and make sure that similar uses are located near each other, and uses that may be in conflict with one another are a little bit separated. So there's two ways that the zoning ordinance groups compatible development. And the first is by use, and that means the use of buildings. So generally there's some categories like residential, commercial, and institutional. There's also industrial. Within each of those categories, the zoning ordinance gets more specific. It talks about things like, for residential, whether you can do single-family detached homes, single-family attached homes, or multifamily homes. With commercial uses, the zoning ordinance specifies whether you can do restaurants or retail sales, and so on and so forth. There's approximately 24 different zoning districts in the county, so each one of those has a different set of uses that are allowed. The second way that zoning guides development is by the size and shape of buildings. So things like building heights, how far it's set back from the street, the amount of parking that's required, those regulations are also contained in the zoning ordinance, and it depends on the use in the zoning district. So the zoning ordinance dictates what can be done by right today. But the comprehensive plan is something that we look at when we have these special applications like rezonings. So the comprehensive plan is the long-range planning document. Basically, it establishes the 20-year vision for the county. Within the comprehensive plan, there are what we call the master plans. In Albemarle County, we have 5 different areas that are within what we call the development areas. So they're large swaths of land. In this image you see on the slide, we have different names for those areas. Crozet is one of the development areas, and it has its own master plan. The master plan does contain specific recommendations for that development area. And it's not just land uses, it's things like transportation improvements, parks and recreation, other things like that that are kind of the long-range goals that the county wants to see established there. Again, in each master plan, it does contain a specific set of future land use recommendations, and those are what staff looks at when we have a rezoning proposal before us. We compare what the master plan says for the future land uses on a property against what the applicant is proposing. It should be noted that sometimes the current zoning that applies to a property is not the same as the future land use recommendation in the master plan. For example, there's a lot of times you can see a property that's historically been used for residential uses, but it may be located to an area that's a little bit more urbanized. Therefore, the master plan may say that commercial future land use is the most appropriate on that property. This is just an example. You can see the images between zoning and land use. So what you see on the left is the zoning map, the zoning ordinance, and then you can see actual land use map on the right. So when a property owner seeks to change the zoning district on their property, again, they have to go to the Board of Supervisors for approval. This process is called the legislative review. The application is reviewed by county staff, and that does also include our partner agencies like VDOT and Albemarle County Service Authority, also the Ravenna Water and Sewer Authority. Basically, we do a staff review and compare the proposal against what the master plan, the comprehensive plan say. And then we write a staff report with a recommendation on whether to approve or deny the project. That gets forwarded to the Planning Commission. They make a recommendation on it at a public hearing. And then it gets forwarded to the Board of Supervisors for a final action on either to approve the rezoning or deny it. So an application to change a property zoning is known as a rezoning. Again, it's reviewed for consistency with what the master plan, the comprehensive plan call for. We do also look at the local zoning ordinance and subdivision ordinance to make sure that nothing that's proposed conflicts with any of those development regulations. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about Old Dominion Village. I'm just going to give a basic overview, and then I'll turn it over to the applicant. So, sorry, give me one moment. The properties that we're looking at right now are located along Three Notched Road. There's two properties that are within Old Dominion Village. They're currently zoned RA rural areas. One of the properties is currently occupied by the Crozet Veterinary Care Center, and then the other property has a single-family detached home on it. What this applicant is looking to do is rezone to the neighborhood model district, and they have some proposed uses they're looking to do, and that includes single-family detached residential structures, single-family attached dwellings, and they're going to keep the veterinary clinic. Overall, there's a maximum of 115 residential units proposed. The Crozet master plan actually has 3 different future land use recommendations across these overall properties. And the image you see in the bottom right of the screen is the future land use map from the Crozet master plan. The colors that you see on these properties are orange, yellow, and green. The orange color represents the urban density residential future land use classification. Basically, that allows for single-family detached homes, townhomes, and apartments at densities between 6 and 12 dwelling units per acre. It also does allow for small-scale office and commercial uses, but there's limitations on the square footage. For example, offices have to be a 5,000 square foot building or less. And then, excuse me, that's commercial. Commercial is 5,000 square feet or less, and offices are 20,000 square feet or less. The yellow color represents neighborhood density residential, and that is primarily single-family detached homes with some single-family attached or townhouse units allowed. The density is less. It's supposed to be between 3 and 6 units per acre. It does also allow for institutional uses, specifically things like churches, public and private schools, or early education centers for children. The green color represents green space, and that is shown on areas of land that are existing or proposed public parks or other open space. Areas that are within privately owned, like a homeowners association open space area, are also shown as green space. And finally, green space does capture the locations of where there's sensitive environmental features in the area. So that includes things like stream buffers, 100-year floodplain, or steep slopes. This is an image of the actual layout or the concept plan that we have been reviewing with this application so far. What it shows is the general street network and layout. It does show where there's environmental features currently located. It doesn't show individual houses because they're just doing a concept plan right now. So they show the locations of where residential blocks will be located, but they don't show like individual property lines. You can see in the bottom left, they're maintaining and keeping that existing vet building. And so again, this just shows the streets, the open space, and where actual uses will go in the future. So the timeline for this process is we began review of the application on June 3rd of this year. We've sent 1 round of review comments to the applicant, and that was done on July 2nd. I believe their intention is to resubmit the application to address some of the staff comments that we had. So that hasn't been done yet, and that means that no public hearings have been scheduled with the Planning Commission or the Board of Supervisors at this time. They will be scheduled at some point in the future, and those will be advertised, so you'll be able to attend those if you like. For the time being, and feel free to share this link with anyone that you know who may want to offer some input or if they have any questions on this project. But through August 17th, that web address you see right there, you can access that and type in any comments or questions you may have. Again, that will be forwarded to the Planning Commission, the board, and the staff report. After August 17th, you can contact me directly via email, if you have any questions or comments that you want to share. My email is listed at the bottom of this screen here. One thing to note is the first letter in my email is the letter B as in boy, not C, and then my last name, Langell, at albemarle.org. So at this point, this concludes my presentation. I am going to stop sharing my screen and let's see. I guess Katura, or are you doing the presentation? You're muted.
There we go. I was going to let Dr. Schulman just say a few words, and then we'll go from there. And both Tim and I are here to address technical issues and share some insights on how we developed and actually commented on some of your report.
Okay.
Thank you, Katura. Just in wide general commentary for the community, we are a local team. I've been a local business owner, health provider, and property owner for close to 40 years in Crozet. The engineer and the developer as well are local businesses. This development includes 2 adjacent properties owned by 2 different families, including the Stark family. Together, approximately about 22, 23 acres. And I own one of those parcels that includes the veterinary hospital. Going back to my understanding of the zoning plan established in the late 70s, I moved to Crozet in 1982. So the intention for Crozet was clear from the start that instead of having development throughout the county, we would have 7 growth centers. I understood Crozet would be a growth center. It certainly has surprised me that the growth has been as robust, for the most part, a good quality of life for residents. And the properties that we're looking at for at least the last 15 years, I have been a participant in the master plan community process going back to 2005. And it's been clear to me that having more cluster development in this as one of the 7 growth areas in the county is critical to our county aesthetic, rather than having uncontrolled development. What is unique about these properties is that the county, the planners, the community has identified the properties to the south that include the former Acme Visible site, as a future employment site. And as we all know in planning, we try to reduce the impact of residential planning on the roads and infrastructure. And going back to around 2004, I presented an idea to the county planning department in the form of a pre-planning hearing. At the time, I was interested in putting up a 6,000 square foot barn structure that aesthetically would have an interior atrium with plants and be a boarding facility as an augmentation to the veterinary hospital. And the day after that pre-planning hearing, Susan Steinmark, who was hired as a long-range planner and advisor by the planning department, unsolicited came to me and made it clear and said, you know, it would be great in the county on the back roads to have a facility like that to serve the public. However, this was identified back in the early 2000s as a property residentially that would support the local employment center. So given that consideration, I withdrew my application and then started becoming an active member on the Crozet Master Plan meetings, mostly looking at Greenway preservation, Greenway trails, and scenic byway. And I'd be on those committees. So it's been clear to me over at least the last 3, if not 4 master plan revisions that the planning department has had a clear intention that this could be a walkable and accessible residential community for the employment center. As we've gone forward through 2010, 2015, now 2020, I've listened to the community. People have shown up, and consistently that has been a strongly expressed wish. I believe between 65 and 85% of the community has supported that idea. Additionally, I've heard community members indicate that regarding aesthetics, the critical aesthetics have really been for destinations like the downtown area. Clearly, this is a property that is within the Crozet growth area. It is clearly designated by the planning department as being consistent with the master plan and the comprehensive plan for urban and neighborhood density development. So with that background, I feel that the community would be well served by giving serious consideration to a well-planned residential community where people can literally be in walkable distance to an employment center, which is very unique in our village community.
I agree with a lot you said there, and just being on the very eastern side of the part of the town area, the shops and stores, and future development of the downtown square where Mr. Stoner is trying to do something on the old Barnes property across the street and that can be visible. This is a good walkable distance and would provide a good neighborhood. So with that, I'll share my screen and talk about a few things, and Tim, feel free to jump in when we get to some streetscape and frontage and talk about how we've addressed some of VDOT and the buffers and so forth. So hopefully I can do this already now. Okay. Got it?
You're up.
Okay, so that's the view from the property. Let's see if we can make the slides change now. There we go. So you can see from that, it's a parcel overview of both properties. The bold area Tim has outlined shows the stream buffer that's been highlighted in green by Cameron, showing that area. And that area will be dedicated to the county for the future trailway and added for that greenway buffer. So there's some rural area off to the right. I don't know if you can see my mouse moving, but this particular area is a rural area, and that'll be left just as open space for the property as well. And the bulk of the development will take place in what is considered the buildable zoned area. Plan, as Cameron pointed out, this is zoned for, her plan consists of 101 townhouses. As he pointed out, our bubble plan, this is how we based our bubble plan off of this, with a vet clinic in the center left where it exists with existing parking lot. We provided some on-street parallel parking on both edges of the parcel for access to the building in addition to the parking lot. Besides the townhouses that surround in front along the street, the 14 single-family lots in the back. And again, the hatched area around those lots is all additional open space areas. There are full frontage improvements along 240, 20-foot tree buffer, which you'll see on another plan. Internal roads will have street trees, and we have proposed 8-foot wide pedestrian bicycle way along each street. Again, this shows a little more detail in block count, but shows basically as in the total of 11 blocks, the one being the commercial vet clinic right here, and then the various townhouse blocks, and then the single family area in the back. This predominantly shows what Tim has created here is our frontage improvements along 240 and the tree buffer. And Tim, if you will describe the frontage improvements, what we will build from edge of property to Parkview Lane. You're on mute. Tim, you're on mute. Now we got you.
Parkview has an existing 8-foot asphalt path running down the right side. We'll connect to that and extend the 8-foot asphalt path across the entire frontage. Turn lanes added to 240. The townhouses that face or run along 240, the fronts of those townhouses will face Route 240, and garages will be accessed through the private streets inside the development. And the townhouses along the right side up against the existing residential will have a landscape buffer along there as well as required.
So we'll probably extend this tree buffer here a little bit. We did provide a stub on this road for future connection to adjoining property. We know the county likes to have connections where possible provided for. Like Tim was saying, along 240, that'll get full curb and gutter, bike lane, and sidewalk improvements. Right, Tim?
It's actually 8-foot asphalt bike and pedestrian path. They're off of the roadway.
That's even safer, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and there is internally an emergency path, but a paved blacktop path taken back to Parkview that so people will have pedestrian access over to Parkview Lane. This is a little bit of the streetscape section showing what is a roadway internal, and also if you just looked at one side would be 240, where you'll have the curb and gutter, the planting strip, and then the 8-foot wide pedestrian and bicycle path, blacktop paved. Crossing that will be driveways that will go to the residential townhomes on internal streets. That's pretty much our show there. Any questions? If I can figure out how to stop sharing, here we go.
Thanks, Tim and Keturah and Dr. Schulman. So at this point, we can start with any questions or comments that any of our attendees have. And it looks like we have one attendee who's raised their hand. That's Terry. Carolyn, if you wouldn't mind switching over so Terry can ask her question.
She is unmuted. She just needs to unmute herself.
Okay, can you hear?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, this is actually Steve, and this is a question for I have two questions. The first question is for the applicants. What would be the cost range for the townhouses and also for the single family houses?
That's hard to guess specifically at this point until we see what all the lot development costs, impact fees, and so forth required. It's hoped that the townhouses will be under 300,000, including the land. The single family will be in the 350 to 4 range.
Okay. And the single family, what's the lot size of those houses?
Tim,
A quarter acre, I believe, is
that's what I was thinking.
Okay. Thank you. And this is the second question I have is for Cameron. Cameron, what is the criteria that the planning officials use to determine whether this is a thumbs up or thumbs down? I mean, I'm assuming that there are certain requirements that have to be satisfied from a planning standpoint to say that this is worthy of us changing the planning with the zoning for this particular parcel of property. Thank you.
Yeah, so there's a multitude of things that we look at. Basically, we look at both what the Crozet Master Plan recommends and what the comprehensive plan recommends. So the first thing is we look at what the future land use recommendation is, and we compare what they're proposing against that recommendation. In this case, the residential units are consistent with what the Crozet Master Plan calls for. As they mentioned, there's also a stream buffer on the property that they're proposing to keep entirely in open space, which that's another recommendation for the land use there. The master plan does contain recommendations related to transportation improvements. So that's things like sidewalks or multi-use paths, bicycle and pedestrian facilities. So we look to see what those specific recommendations are for these properties and then compare the proposal against that. And then there's another set of factors we look at that are actually in the comprehensive plan called the neighborhood model principles. And so those are some guidelines for things like basically how the project should look. It's things like streetscape improvements, street trees. It's things like location of, the front doors of buildings, what streets they should face. It also calls for redevelopment of certain parcels if they're already developed. So we look at those factors as well. In the staff report that will go to the commission and the board, we basically bullet point list them all out and describe what the master plan says and what the comprehensive plan says, and then compare the application for being consistent with those principles and those recommendations. Okay, it looks like we have another attendee who's raised their hand. Terry, if you're there. Carolyn, can you?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, hi Terry.
Okay, I have a question. I bike that piece of 3-notch road several times a week. And as much as I love an 8-foot wide off the road bike ped path, if it lasts for 2 blocks, it doesn't do you much good. Given that it has to connect on the other sides, right? I guess I'd like to see the road expanded enough to have a bike lane on the road as well, since it's not going to connect to bike paths on either end.
That's a good point.
I mean, do you expect me to be riding in front of those houses and then get onto this path for 100 feet or something, and then get off and ride in front of the laundromat? You know, it doesn't do much good with that.
Thanks, Terry. Yeah, and I'll start. And I don't know, Tim, Katura, if you want to offer anything else after I'm finished. We acknowledge that. A lot of times, the bike lanes that are called for by the master plan, again, those are recommendations that really we can only bring up when we're looking at rezoning applications such as this one. So it makes it difficult a lot of times to get, right at once, get a full bike network created, because other properties, to the east or west could develop as by right, which they wouldn't be subject to the master plan's recommendations. And therefore we couldn't require those bike lanes to be built. So in cases like this, we tell applicants, hey, master plan does recommend bike lanes here. So if you want to be consistent with that, you should show them. We do have what we call a list of implementation projects in the master plans. And occasionally some of those can be funded through the county's capital improvement funds. So it could be a case where if we get a segment of a bike lane constructed along a road, and then we also have the money available to finish it out and connect it to like downtown Crozet, for example, that could be something that the county undertakes as a public project as opposed to waiting for private development to occur. And that's sort of the process for it and how we can actually get those bike lanes and other improvements built. Katura and Tim, I don't know if you want to talk about why you're offering the 8-foot path off street versus the on street path, but if you have anything else you can offer that now.
Sure. Let me touch on that a little bit. And we're happy to put the bike lane on the edge of the street, the public street. We just felt by removing it out of the existing street edge that it might be somewhat safer. Putting it along the street edge and within the curb of the street, certainly acceptable to us in our design. And we have no particulars one way or another. In the many projects we've all been involved in, we've built sidewalks and bike lanes that start from nothing and go to nothing and ultimately sit that way for a while. And like you point out, Cameron, there are many parcels that will never be developed that are before that, and after it, they're already developed and don't have any, you have no way to make them build that, so.
Well, I agree that a bike ped path off the street is desirable, and I love to see that. You know, I guess what I'm saying is it would be nice if we had, in addition to that, the street widened enough to have at least a small bike lane on the street as well for through traffic. Because certainly if I were living in that neighborhood and I had my 8-year-old go out on their bike, they could go, you know, I would want them on the off-street path. So that's just my, you know, I want everything. What can I tell you?
So given the right of way we have available and the distance we have to work with, it's a matter of one or the other.
Okay, thank you.
We felt that the one off the street, like you pointed out, would be a little bit safer. There will be a smooth transition from the roadway at both ends of it where it will connect back to the roadway surface.
Suppose the 2 turn lanes on the front, one going into this development and one going to Parkview, is kind of felt that a bike lane through there might be a little more complicated than on a straight stretch of road. But
That's a good point too, Tim. Thanks. Any other questions? Jen, I noticed you raised your hand before. Do you have a question?
I was, can you say again the total units that are proposed?
Say that again.
The total number of units proposed, whenever Cameron went on it for a slide in the beginning.
115, which is the density.
Okay, thank you.
101 townhouses and 14 single family.
Is the existing vet clinic the only commercial use that would remain?
It is. It's the
Okay.
commercial use intended to, one, stay on the property.
Okay.
And we didn't feel it was necessary with all the other commercial land available to add more commercial space.
And to just sort of piggyback on what Terry was getting at, if the pathway was done as you're proposing it, I'm pretty sure there would still be, in the event that there's funding and there was some sort of movement towards getting that 240 expanded to include a bike lane, maybe, as anyone who can answer this, is there still a VDOT right of way that would be able to be used for that purpose?
I don't think so. Tim, you want to touch on that? But
we'd have to convert, if I understand your question, if you wanted to come back later and add a bike lane to 240, then the 8-foot path would have to be reduced in size to accommodate. There wouldn't be additional right-of-way between the 8-foot path and the curb to put a bike lane in along the road and leave the 8-foot pedestrian bike path across the front. Is that, did I understand your question correctly?
Yeah, there's just not enough distance.
Because there's not enough space, but the path isn't in the VDOT right away. You're saying that with the VDOT right away, there's not enough space to do a bike lane through there. And it would encroach on the path if that were to be built.
The right of way will be just behind, 2 foot behind the asphalt path. So a bike lane would have to fit between that right of way and the curb and gutter, I guess. So extending the curb and gutter out would encroach on the 8-foot path, and that would have to be reduced in width.
We are dedicating a great deal of extra frontage to the VDOT right away.
Okay.
For the 8-foot path. But not an additional 5 feet to come put a bike lane in and an 8-foot path in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it looks like we have 2 questions, or 2 people have raised their hands. First, we're going to let Judy and Buck ask their question or offer their comments.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Great. I live right east of that. You can imagine I'm extremely unhappy about this. That land before has 1 residence on it. All of a sudden, half the world is going to be right next door to me. What buffer do you put in between my land and where you're building those houses?
So you live just east of the Stark property?
Yes, the lady that owned it, that passed away,
Yes.
is my wife's aunt.
So we have designated a continuous 20-foot staggered tree buffer, evergreen buffer along that entire boundary. And then everything that wraps around the rear of your property will be left as existing woodlands. And even at the back side of the residential lots, there are existing woodlands.
Well,
I'll go back to,
it's a pretty large drop off behind us, so it's kind of hard to, whoops.
yeah, hold on. I can figure out how to show that. Well, maybe not. I was going to try and show that buffer.
That's okay. I thought I saw it. There was a colored bar there between my property and where the townhouses were. I guess the back of the townhouses, I suppose.
That's right. And then we stopped the residential lots west of your rear property, your corner, and left the woods entirely untouched behind you.
Okay, but the part that really concerns me is the front part up to the road, because as I go out, my land looks right into the back of that.
When you come out your driveway?
Yeah, when I come out my driveway on my right as I come out, now there's a field and open space out there. If this gets done, there's going to be umpteen million townhouses just right along the edge of that, right, with the buffer you said you'd put in.
They'll be behind our buffer, and then there'll be the end of 1 row along the frontage of 240. And as I mentioned to Tim, we should just extend that tree buffer all the way up until it, doesn't interfere with your sight distance when you pull out.
Thank you.
I appreciate your concern, and we'll address that.
I'm going to be concerned because, like I say, I can probably stand on my front porch with a good throw and toss a softball over to where that property starts.
Right. I've seen your house.
Thank you. And it's this one, the house that you'll be taking down that was Betty's, my wife's grandfather built, as the one we live in the property on now is.
Mhm.
So
I actually looked at the house and talked with Ashley and his brother, and we're looking at trying to preserve a portion of that house and leave it as a clubhouse and a little more into that. Well, there are some spectacular trees that have been planted on the property that Tim's located and that we made sure that we've left in an open space to preserve some of that older growth.
Oh, I've got another question. You know where the gas line is behind, the gas distribution thing is behind Dr. Showman's?
Yes.
I have a gas line going from that across the property to my house. Is that going to affect me and my gas line?
It will, but I spoke with the county gas line engineer from Columbia Gas literally today. And he's offered to run the line through this property for the development and make sure that you have a new stable connection.
Okay, run it basically the same way it is now. Is that what you're saying?
It will come in generally, it'll hit your property at the same location, but
Okay,
follow streets.
that's a load off my mind because it would be awful cold winters if I didn't have any gas.
Right. No, I'm aware that you have a gas line that randomly through that property.
Okay, thank you.
But
Okay, next up, we have a question from Michael. Michael, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Great, yeah. I had looked through the code of development thing. It was listed on the page. I can't look at it right now because Albemarle County's website's still down, I guess. But I just wondered if someone could speak a little bit to the efforts to include affordable housing in this development. I know that there was the 15%, which is what the county requires, I believe. Although I would, and any clarity or correction on that would be good. But yeah, I was just wondering if anyone could speak to the intent to include affordable housing and what they think that'll look like.
yeah, there'll be similar units in the project, so there won't be a big discrepancy between what is built in the townhomes and what considered to be affordable housing, and there will be the designated block or area and the number 15%, so 16, 17 units will be affordable.
And if I can ask a sort of follow up on that, although I know this is probably beyond the purview of a zoning question, is it anticipated that those will be for rental or for sale?
I would imagine for sale.
Okay.
This is not a rental, intended to be a rental neighborhood.
Sure.
And they'll be at the price range that is the medium description to meet the county requirements.
Sure, right, yeah. And I know you mentioned prices earlier, so.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
Looks like we have another question. I believe Terry.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so this is Terry. I have two questions for the planning for you, Cameron. When you're doing the application, are you going to take into account the density increase in an area that is primarily rural? And then the second one is the impact on traffic on Route 240, which is already, right now it's quiet because of COVID, but during normal commuting time, that road can get pretty backed up down towards the light. So is that something else that will be taken into account when you're taking this application?
Yes. Actually, that's from a land use standpoint, one of the primary things that we look at, and that's what the proposed density is. So the Crozet master plan with its future land use recommendations does have a recommended density range for the properties if they were to be rezoned. Again, there's two different residential future land use designations on these properties, and one of them says that the density should be between 6 and 12 units per acre. And the other one, which is a larger area on these properties, says that the density should be between 3 and 6 units per acre. So On the plan that the applicant has given us, they've drawn out where those lines are and those boundaries, and the 115 units is within that range. So does that answer the density question?
Yeah, I would assume so, but I'm wondering how that does fall within that density range that you reference when there's, especially where the townhomes are concerned.
Yeah, so we look at it basically on a block by block basis. And so I think some of the comments that we had in our first review letter to the applicant did ask for a little bit more clarification on what the density was in certain areas of this proposal. So again, if there is a part of the property that it is being proposed to be more dense than what the master plan recommends, we would cite that as an unfavorable factor in our staff report when we forward that to the commission and the board. Again, so there were some comments asking for a little bit more clarification on the plan. I think the overall proposed density within the project is about 4.8 units per acre. Again, there's two different land use designations on there, so we do need to see like what the density is within each of those, but it is something that we do look at. For your second question about transportation, yes, we look at that as well. We ask these applicants to provide us basically the average daily trip figures that they expect to be generated from the development. There's an international traffic engineering manual that lists out the average trip generation for basically every land use that there is. So we have a transportation planner in my Department of Community Development who looks at that. They evaluate it. Again, these applications do go to staff with VDOT, and they offer any comments or concerns they have basically about, the trip generation, if any more road improvements are needed in order to accommodate the expected vehicle trips that would result.
And I would hope that when they do the traffic study, they will not do it during the current time period.
That doesn't have any bearing on it. It's strictly by the number, as Cameron was pointing out, in a manual basis.
Yeah, but this year is going to be exceptional. The traffic is much less impacted right now, but given when we return to so-called normal life, that could be very different.
The manuals are based on the last 10, 15 years of
Okay, good.
traffic. So it's based on that and does not take the current conditions into as a factor.
Yeah, historical, right.
Thank you.
Hey, Cameron, just one follow-up question on the traffic. So do you evaluate the traffic singularly with just this development, or is it more on an aggregate in Crozet that as different communities come online, as we're starting to see in Old Trail and across the street with the View and in Foothill Crossing, so you're adding more and more houses on a regular type of a basis, and does the aggregate come into play as opposed to just the impact of Old Dominion?
Yeah, I mean, we do look at, with other developments that are occurring, when we have a rezoning, for example, sometimes some of the neighborhoods out there were developed by right. So we couldn't require those developers to do traffic studies or even make any sort of road improvements to the existing roads out there. With a rezoning, we can, and we do try and factor in like what the trip generation is being on these adjacent developments that have recently come online. I mean, state law does restrict us to an extent for how much road improvements we can really require with a rezoning application. I mean, for example, with this one, it would be difficult to justify, requiring the developer to expand Route 250 as opposed to Route 240, just because this project isn't near there. Nevertheless, as an ongoing effort, we do try and with our master plans recommend transportation improvements for the entire street network in that development area. One of my colleagues, Andrew Newpol, is here right now, and he can speak a little bit more to that because, interestingly enough, we are in the process of updating the Crozet master plan. So if there's specific areas, whether it's near this property or elsewhere in Crozet that are particularly troublesome right now with traffic issues, we are looking for public input so that we know where those are and we can try and come up with some solutions that can be put into the master plan as implementation projects. Andrew, I don't know if you want to offer anything else on that.
Sure, Cameron, I'd be happy to. Good evening, everyone. My name's Andrew Newpel. I'm a planner with Albemarle County, and I'm one of the staff team leads for the Crozet Master Plan project. For some background, Dr. Schulman mentioned the Crozet Master Plan a couple times in his introduction, and Cameron's also referenced it too. It is a community-driven process that really focuses on turning the future of the Crozet community and what it looks like, how we will manage change and growth in Crozet specifically over the next 20 years. The process did start last September with some visioning workshops, and we've started to actually work through more recently some of the other specific details about transportation, vehicular, bicycle, pedestrian in this area as well. So I'm going to post a link in the chat to, since due to the pandemic, we've had to move a lot of our engagement work to an online format through public input, but I just sent out a link to that also through the public input site. As part of the master plan, one of the topics we're currently working on is a transportation and connectivity focus right now. There's some question about the traffic produced by this development versus the aggregate and within Crozet. During the master plan, we are taking a look at the overall traffic network and the streets within the Crozet development area. We are actually getting started right now with a traffic study that will focus on looking at current traffic volumes. Not during the pandemic, we've had to work on the methodology to make sure we use a lot of recent counts that have been put together for other developments, and also anticipating more recent impacts. We'll be looking at what expected future development will contribute to the traffic network. And part of the section of Route 240 3-Notch Road between Park Ridge Drive and Crozet Avenue near this development will be evaluated as part of that. We are also looking at different bicycle and pedestrian implementation projects along this corridor. One of the major themes we've really heard about through the master plan process has been the importance of connecting some of the Crozet's eastern neighborhoods to downtown. And this includes the areas around the employment center with Music Today, Star Hill, and the Acme Visible Records site around where this project is proposed. So we are looking at all this throughout the process, and if you haven't been involved with the process, I really encourage you to get involved. It's not too late, and we're really starting to move into an important step, which is identifying the different implementation projects and exactly where we need to focus in on improvements and prioritize those in the coming master plan. So I'd encourage you to get involved if you can, or please me directly if you have any questions or like to share concerns with me. Again, they can be accessed through publicinput.com/Imagine Crozet. And I think we might be able to follow up with some other information as well. But we are looking at all the traffic impacts throughout the entire Crozet community with the master plan update. As Cameron mentioned, this is the one of the main tools to evaluate land use and rezoning proposals against. Currently, we are reviewing this project against the 2010 master plan, but we'll have an updated master plan hopefully within the next year for the Crozet community, and the process is still ongoing. And if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer them whenever. So thank you all.
Thanks, Andrew. Okay, so we began this meeting a few minutes late. I know it's 7:05. I think we have time for one more question if there are any. No one's raised their hand, but if there's any final comments or questions anyone has, please use that raise your hand function and we can take one more.
So if not, Jenny, I would be more than happy to sit down with you and review this project in detail and discuss any other concerns that may be raised to you in the interim prior to our submittal. It's our intention to get back our submittal. We wanted to have this meeting before to get public input before we resubmitted with our applications. Be happy to do that.
Okay, it doesn't look like anyone's raised their hands, so I think at this point we can conclude the meeting. I'd like to say thank you to everyone who attended. That includes everyone on the applicant side, my colleagues, and then of course all the attendees. These meetings are really important, and we're very grateful that you did attend and offer your comments or questions. So again, if you have any follow-up comments or questions that you have, you can find my email on the county's website, and you just email me directly. I'll get back to you within 24, 48 hours. And with that, I think we can end the meeting. So good night, everyone.
Thank you, Cameron. Appreciate it.
Good night.